Well, I must say this was quite an interesting session indeed. Well, thank you so much, panelists. I'm sure everybody had a lot of doubts, a lot of questions are coming up. So it was really an amazing, interesting session. So now we move on to the next topic. As all of you guys witnessed, the topic for now is security and compliance with one stack. When infrastructure is hybrid, perimeters are extending and digitalization going fast paced. To talk about this, we have our speakers. We have Prachi Bhambi Bohara, the Assistant Vice President from Swissray. We have Varundeep Kaur, the Chief Information Officer from Spice Money. Ambarish Kumar Singh, the Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, Godrej and Boyce Manufacturing Co. Limited. Mr. Sangamesh Shivaputrappa, Head Cyber Defense Center, Infosys, and Mr. Maheswaran Shamugasundaram, Country Manager, South Asia, Varonis. Over to you, Ambarish, to moderate the session.
Everyone, good afternoon. Welcome all of you for this very exciting panel discussion. And the topic is very relevant today. And topic is security and compliance with one stack, where we see the infrastructure is hybrid, perimeters are extending. Probably we know all of us know that they know more concept of perimeter. And then the digital transformation journey each organization is embarked on. So if you look back around 2 years back, the digital transformation and adoption has been exponential. It's not has been incremental itself. Okay. So as the threat landscape has changed a lot. So today we are going to discuss, and I'm sure there is going to be a lot of key takeaways for the audiences, and we have very experienced elite panel to discuss about it. So not wasting much of time. Let's get started. So first, I like to go to Mrs. Varundeep Kaur. She is the CIO, Spice Money. So, in your opinion, Varundeep, what do you think? As you know that today hybrid infrastructure is hybrid, work from anywhere. So, employee want to work from anywhere, from any device, any place, seamlessly. At the same time, the digital transformation adoption is on the rise, and so is the threat landscape. So, in your opinion, what are the top three challenges you have seen, and how do you suggest to handle them, or how have you handled it? Because I'm sure these problems have come to everybody, and we all have handled these problems in some or other way. So we like to
Right.
hear from you,
Right.
Varundeep.
Hi, Amrish. Hi, everyone. And thank you for putting up this question, Amrish. I believe the top challenges which we faced with this hybrid environment coming in and with pandemic coming in and highlighting the security issues and bringing security on the forefront. So one of the biggest challenges, and which I believe, is that humans remain the weakest link in all the security and compliance ecosystem, and most of the breaches and the privacy issues, compliance issues happen due to the misconfigurations or unawareness and or ignorance of the people who are involved. We always believe that security is infosec or appsec teams or security teams responsibility, and we miss out the other participants or other stakeholders who are part of important part of the ecosystem, which are the users. With this hybrid environment coming in where people can log in from anywhere, and with the certain reports coming in, we found that there are around 27 new digital identities per person that are getting created in past 2 years, and that brings a lot of security issues on foreground. So first issue which I would say is the unawareness or ignorance of the people. And how do we can solve it? It is only through continuous training and information that needs to be passed on to the employees. And this cannot be done just through the trainings, because what happens, people just go into the training room, they hear out and they remember it for a day and then they forget. So here we need to invest into such an, certain applications which keep on regularly assessing the risk of each and every individual in the organization, and keep on nudging them with certain questions, queries, and understanding what is that they have understood and how to protect themselves. The second issue which the hybrid environment has brought in or highlighted is the skills and knowledge gap. What we have found that in all organizations, while security is getting a highlighted space, the skills in order to match the recent requirements of security and compliance are not there. And hence, and in most of the organizations, the security and network security and compliances is not the main focus area. Everybody wants to focus on the businesses, right? So in that case, there is always a gap, and the academia also, the new people who are coming in or joining in the organizations are not able to fill that particular gap. And how that can be solved is and how we have tried to solve it, that you have to partner with a managed security services provider who have got that kind of necessary skills, and your teams can work along with them to bridge the gap and learn on the go. And this will also help you manage the attrition part of your side. While you cannot pass on the responsibility of managing or governance part of it, that still stays with you. However, that through this you are not under a kind of a risk where you are unable to manage the security. The third biggest challenge which I believe is this: with the hybrid environment coming in, there are a lot of complexity that has got increased, while the visibility of overall ecosystem has reduced. Means it is very difficult to understand and view the hybrid or your on premise infrastructure and your cloud infrastructure on the same pane. And what is there, that on premise as well as your cloud environment, you follow different policies, different procedures, and then there are certain configuration or misconfigurations that happen. So how do we believe that it
How
can
do
be?
we believe that it can be?
That one is that
That
you,
one is that you.
so one part
So
of it,
one part of it,
I am getting a
I
echo,
am
I don't
getting
know.
the echo. I don't know why.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
So here I believe what we can do is that we can templatealize all the configurations. Like if you have to deploy or depute a new infrastructure, you should automate that particular stuff. You should templatealize what is required as a hygiene check, and you should involve security as a inherent part at the design level. Automation should be given much more focus, because otherwise there is no way in a humanly manner that you will be able to visualize and see. And similarly, your logs, like the same SOC implementations that you would have got, they should also come onto a single platform which can be assessed, which can be viewed, and your teams know what that needs to be done. All the scripts means SOP should be defined. So these are the three typical challenges which are more related towards people. If these are addressed, I believe we will be in a much safer space in order to address the security challenges or the threats that we are facing now. That's all from my side, Ambarish.
Yeah, thanks. I think you brought in very critical points. You touched upon the importance of awareness, importance of automation, because the huge infrastructure from on-prem to cloud, and if you want to achieve have a single source of truth, you want to apply a security compliances, security settings all across, automation is the key. Yeah. So moving on to Mahesh. Mahesh, we heard Varundeep. What is your opinion on this? Because you have been working with various clients, you know the industry, how it is moving, and you are talking to various clients, etc. So what is your outlook? What is your view on this?
Yeah, thanks, Ambarish. Yeah, I think you should go on mute, Ambarish. Yeah, thanks. So, hello everyone, good afternoon, and great thoughts and insights from Varundeep. So, just to continue from there, I think the attack surface, like we discussed earlier, has increased significantly for organizations because of organizations embracing hybrid. And Ambarish already has highlighted the challenges. Predominantly, I'll break that into three parts. I think data everywhere is a problem. Data is moving beyond organization boundaries and assets. Users are accessing it from anywhere and any device. So the footprint, the number of device footprint that an organization has, or the data that is going to be there on devices, is increasing exponentially for organizations. But the third most important thing is, especially post-pandemic, when with people working from home, there is a very thin line between professional and personal life. And within a few hours in a day, I think users are exhibiting. There are chances that users might exhibit some risky behaviors, which is very critical for organizations to detect. I mean, like people, and I think Varundeep mentioned a great point. I mean, all these passive awareness campaigns probably might not be useful, especially when users are under stress, users are managing crisis at the same time handling some critical issues. They probably might forget about these awareness campaigns. So they might tend to click links that they should not. They probably try to share credentials with people that they should not. They might try to share data with destinations that they should not. So, and we have seen these instances happening. I mean, we actually engage with customers and assess certain incidents that have happened in their organizations. So again, awareness campaigns have to be more active. But despite all this, despite this huge increase in attack surface, one thing that's important to know and that we always emphasize to customers is two things which are most important for most organizations are users and data. And we are also seeing that attacks are happening around these two elements now. While the attack surface has increased significantly, it's getting important for organizations to see how many of these controls follow users and data. And that's where we think there is some organizations, there is a significant gap there, because we are seeing more and more attacks happening around identities, more and more attacks happening around information, but organizations are not prepared to detect and contain these attacks, mostly because of the gaps that exist in their security posture. So while it's important to have threat-centric controls, and most organizations, based on our when we do consulting and engage with customers, we think if you adopt the 3I model around SOC, I think Varundeep mentioned about the SOC framework, and it's important to embrace automation there. Most organizations have a very good SOC around the first I, which is infra-centric. So organizations are able to detect threats around infrastructure, but we see significant gaps with identity-centric threats or information-related threats. So we think it's important for organizations to also cover these gaps and ensure that threats are detected as and when it's happening. And if that happens, I think organizations will probably move into a predictive framework despite the surge in the attack surface. Ambarish. That's it from me.
Thanks, Mahesh. I think you brought out critical points, like you touched upon the basic hygiene, the public piece, and second piece you talked about identity access management, which is the key, a starting point of security, right? Because you need to understand what are the various personas you have, what are the roles they are performing, and if they anomaly, how to detect it via SOC or early stage. Because it's all depend upon the how much automation you have done in the SOC, how you integrated, what are the pieces you integrated into the SOC, are you logging the right logs in the right manner, what Varundeep was talking about. So by looking at this, what we discussed so far is, let's move on to the Sangamesh, who is heading cyber defense for Infosys, right? So no matter whatever the technology we deploy, correct? If you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. The more your IR part, your cyber defense is strong, probably you'll able to get back to a normal, because no matter how much technology you deploy, there could be a breach, right? So it's important to understand the Sangamesh perspective, what he see in today's world, where where we see the traditional security approach has been broken, and it has happened naturally, right? And we all had our own share of problems to solve, mainly in last 2 years, and they are going to stay there, right? There are certain problems which got created naturally. They are going to stay there, and we need to solve them if at all not yet solved, because there are a lot of quick fixes also happened during that time. So Sangbase, just wanted to look at your perspective, what you see from the cyber defense perspective holistically, from on into cloud, you see IoT world is coming up, and look at the security and compliance in one stack.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
So,
So,
actually,
actually,
Mrs. Kaur has mentioned about, like, bringing the security at the initial stage, when during the design stage. So what we call that as a security by design itself. So when we talk about security by design, it should be considered right from the beginning, when we are actually thinking about developing any infrastructure or application, and also in terms of how it can be secured, right? So when we talk about security, the other aspect that you are actually asking about is from the compliance perspective. Well, while we see a lot of threats in the this cyber landscape, I mean, especially this pandemic has actually given more insights to the advanced threats as well, right? We have seen the exponential growth of cyber threats in this past 2 years, be it in terms of the phishing, be it in terms of the ransomware attack, and it has also seen the advanced and sophistication that the threat actor is using it as part of the campaign. We were seeing that Maitre attack framework is getting updated very frequently nowadays with the new tactics and techniques, right? So the cyber threat landscape has been changing drastically. Be it a ransomware, the modus operandi was being destructive in nature when we had seen WannaCry and NotPetya. But nowadays we see like it has been like extortion, be it a Revil ransomware or Maze ransomware. They actually exfiltrate the data from the organization and then encrypt it. So it is like, the shift has been from being destructive, and it has gone to the extortion, because just by descriptive, organization were able to be better prepared in terms of their backup and backup strategy, so that they don't need to pay ransom to the threat actors, right? So now it has gone to the next level, where threat actors are doing extortion, where we see the threat actors are demanding for a ransom. If not been paid, the exfiltrated data is being put up in the dark web or even in the surface web as well, right? That is leading to the compliance issues, right? So if we look at from the HIPAA compliance or PCI DSS, or even for that matter GDPR, which is well known to everyone in the industry, so there is a significant focus on data protection to come, and also the organization is forced to deploy sufficient controls to protect the data, to comply with the regulatory bodies, right? And otherwise, again, they are going to be in the media for bad reasons, and they have to pay huge penalty as well, right? So in this juncture, like, we need to have a balance between security and compliance. So security should not be a overkill to in the name of, like, securing an asset or securing the data. We put all possible controls to safeguard it, but think about, like, when the data is required, it is not being made available, obviously it is impact to the basic principle of information security, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? So when the data is needed, and if it is not been made available, that defeats the purpose of the overall information security principles. So that is like, we look at as a security overkill, and we should also be looking at similar fashion in taking the compliance requirement into consideration. So one of the things that I would say from a practitioner perspective is look at the different regulatory requirements based on whatever the regulatory body that the organization needs to comply with. Just put it together, and one of the best practice that I would say is like custom tailor those requirements, because in the services industry probably they might have to come sorry, comply with multiple regulatory bodies, be it GDPR or be it HIPAA, be it ISO standard as well, and have to inherit the best practices by NIST. So it is actually impossible, literally impossible to keep track of every single aspect to comply against every standard. So my point of view is put it together, create a common framework which can actually comply with multiple regulatory compliance, right? And there will be overlap, because end of the day, all regulatory compliance are focusing on the data protection and enhancing the security controls and processes in the organization, right? So just put together all whatever the regulatory compliance that you need to be adhered to. So put it together and create a common single framework where which you decide in terms of like, what all the things that you can do, which is going to be getting you ready for complying with multiple regulatory compliance standards, right? So that is one thing that is my advice for the organizations, to look at it holistically in balancing security and compliance, right? And the third element is obviously like the user experience. When we say like, we are good at security by putting a lot of security controls, and also to adhere to the compliance requirements, we restrict the access to the data or whatever, right? End of the day, like, it is going to impact to the user experience. So obviously we need to take the third aspect of user experience also into consideration, where we balance security and compliance, including the privacy aspect as well, so that we deliver the best user experience to the end users. Over to you, Ambarish.
Yeah, thanks, Sangamesh. I think you brought out the two three very key points. One is you brought out how to have a right balance between security and the operations, right? Security should not be an overkill, which is generally people think, right? You look at the security has to be approachable, correct? It has to be reasonable. You're talking about, and look at the user perspective, correct? Rather than you're bombarding users with so many of maybe email campaigns, whatever it is, right? It has to be probably look at the from the user perspective, and we need to be sensitive over the users. So how to strike a balance between the security and the overall experience we are giving to the org. A third thing we talked about is the uh, how to consolidate the various regulatory and framework requirements, mandatory compliance requirements an organization might have, so that you know holistically what you are supposed to do, right? Otherwise, you we as an organization will waste a lot of time on adhering to those compliance requirements, and there are a lot of duplication of work, etc. I
Yeah,
think a lot of work has to be done in this direction. I think a lot of organizations are doing it some or other bit, but holistically we do not have a such framework as such. But if you talk about things are happening, moving in the right direction.
yeah,
That is what
that's
I
right.
can say.
Yeah, that's right.
Sure. I think I'll move on to the Prachi. So Prachi, just wanted to know view on actually today is the we all agree we all were uh, just around a few minutes back Varundeep was talking about the digital adoption, right? So earlier we talked about before pandemic era, a lot of organizations had a lot of hesitation to adopt digital technologies. Okay, because there was a fear of failure, a risk appetite of the organizations was low, and because there is a cost involved into it, right? Pandemic, there was a business survival need, and and a lot of organization has embarked on this journey naturally. Maybe due to they have seen the value of the digital technologies, which they can see from the newest technologies, newest companies such as e-commerce. You see cloud kitchen companies, you see Ola's of the world, right? So their confidence level is high. Second thing is their business survival, right? So it has become the natural, and that is how you see that digital transformation has taken its own course, and it is there. It is going to happen. Every organization is there on some or other stage of digital transformation. So from cybersecurity perspective, Prachi, from your view, what are the challenges you see on this journey the various organizations are adopting? And yeah, and what are the suggestions you would like to make to the audiences?
Very good afternoon, everyone.
Very good
Thank you for
afternoon,
the
everyone,
question.
and thank you for the question.
Mhm.
Godrej.
Thank you. I think because there was an echo. So, what I personally feel is that if I start diving into the challenges that are faced because of the transformation, it is going to be a really long list, right? Because every organization is facing different challenges and it can go from 1 to 100 in like a blink of the eye. But let me share my perspective on it and tell you a few primary challenges that I personally see. And I think Varundeep also touched based upon it initially. I'll start with the first point, which is the strategy, right? Like you said, organizations are going the natural course because pandemic pushed us into it, but they are not exactly having a digital transformation strategy in place. So it is just happening with the course, but what are they doing to ensure that it is a seamless process? So there are a few points under the strategy as well which they should look after. Uh, there are like the IT systems, the inventory, which any organization is doing, be it big or small. There is this major gap in maintaining of that inventory, right? Small organizations have a small team, so it may be a little bit of a struggle for them to kind of have the human support to manage that. Big organizations, what I've seen across is that they have their inventory in different sets. There is no consistency in maintaining the same. Same ways, there is this legacy systems which they are probably using, right? If there is an organization which is 100 years old, there are some or the other technology which they have been following for the past 50 years. And maybe only one team is aware of it, but in this digital transformation process, they are overlooking that aspect. And that kind of opens a set for threat and vulnerability, right? Any attacker would actually want to target something like that. So organizations really need to understand what strategy they have in place, what inventory they have in place, and how can they maintain that appropriately. Because right now, again, because of this change, it is the focus is on agile methods. Agile methods means it's again a very open-ended thing, right? Every team is following their own agile methods, but there needs to be one single approach from the organization perspective, which is also communicated across, not just in place, but communication to the various teams is also very important. Next, I think Varun mentioned this is lack of human skills, but I think lack of IT people skills is something that organizations should focus on as well. Because even if they put the strategy in place, who is going to execute it and how are they going to execute it? So having those SOPs in place, ensuring the IT skill set is appropriately trained, investing in their trainings, all of this also should be taken care of. I think someone also touched upon the budget aspect, and Ambarish, you also mentioned, excuse me, apologies. You also mentioned that, this section is taking the budget, but there is a very clear gap between the budget and the security requirements, right? It is a very high possibility that your budget may be less for your security, and then you are compromising on certain aspects. So that organizations clearly need to define, and that onus comes on the security team. They need to clearly define that these are primary parameters with respect to our digital transformation journey that we cannot overlook no matter what. So they need to build their case appropriately to their leadership so that they get the budget assigned, and then the security parameters are put in place. Because attackers, I think it's a very common known fact between us that attackers try 100 times, 1,000 times. They just need one time to get into the system, but security team needs to defend all 100 times to ensure that we are able to manage it. So cyber security from that perspective is very important, and we need to ensure that our security aspects are in place. The last thing which I want to bring is, again, like Varun said, the human beings, right? Which is the weakest link. And I totally agree with her. But it is not only with training that we can go ahead and ensure that that weakest link is closed, because I'm sure every organization is doing their information security or cybersecurity training. You will have some kind of a module, you are making it mandatory for the employees, and they are doing it. They may understand the concepts of phishing, they may understand the concept with the new age tech adoption that is happening. There may be a ransomware attack or a malware attack, but what next? So I will propose to the organizations that you should have an analysis in place as well. This uh, analysis obviously cannot be 100% because every human is different. But what we have seen is that if you look at the overall population, you'll understand that the region-wise or location-wise or employee-wise, the mentality of employees or people is very similar. So if you do an analysis basis that and you understand what are the threat factors, where are they the weakest link, then you will be able to actually help them cover that aspect rather than just having a generic training for your employees to look at. So these are the four primary parameters that I think will help. These are the challenges, and I think I kind of tried to answer how to
Try
address
to
them as
answer
well.
how to address them as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Uh, yeah, thanks, Prachi. I think you brought out one very key point is one is the have a strategy in place. Whatever you're doing, are you embarking on digital transformation journey? So you should have a strategy so that you're not missing out the critical element and you're looking at holistically. Second thing you brought out, have assessment, holistic assessment done so that you know clearly you're bringing out your priorities, you're aligning your resources accordingly. Yeah. Yeah, so moving on to the next stage of this discussion, Mahesh, just I'd like to know your thoughts. See, we all discuss about threat landscape change, digital adoption, etc. So as the now we are started talking about the zero trust, right? At the one end, we are talking about zero trust. At one end, the business want to go live, go to production, wanted to adopt agile methodology, right? Want to live as quickly as possible. Okay. So where do you see how to align this both together? What are the critical elements probably you can think of because you keep talking to multiple clients, you see you're solving multiple problems, right? So where do you see
But
strike a balance from your perspective? I'd like to be and which is probably you want to communicate to the audience.
sure. Thanks, Ambarish.
Sure. Thanks, Ambarish.
Just wait for it to get, yeah, thanks. So I guess, I mean, zero trust is again the buzzword, and we've seen in every customer that we engage are in the journey of adopting zero trust. So there are three core elements, when it comes to organizations looking at zero trust. What network, identities, and when I say network, it also includes applications, identities, zero trust around identities. But one thing that we see is missing is zero trust also around data, because finally, the credential that's going to be authorized at the network layer or at the application layer is allowing that identity to go and access data. So we actually don't see most organizations factoring zero trust around data, but they are in this journey of doing it through around network and identity. I'll just digress away from the question a bit and then emphasize why it's important to have zero trust also around data, because when we go and perform assessments, we see a tremendous amount of information being overexposed because of collaboration. Let's take teams. I mean, I'm just taking teams as an example. What essentially happens when somebody creates a team in O365, right? So an AD a group gets created in Azure AD. A SharePoint site gets created in SharePoint Online. A hidden mailbox gets created in Exchange Online, and OneDrive. I mean, a lot of OneDrive folders gets created because all one-on-one chats and attachments get stored there, which again references back to SharePoint Online. All of these tasks earlier were done by IT and reviewed by security, and security approves it. But now, because of organizations embracing collaboration, users are doing all of this, and it leaves a huge blind spot for most organizations. I mean, just to tell you a few examples, we have seen in one of the assessments where a secretary of a board member created a team site, and the default exposure level was org wide, and 600 GB of information were there in that site that was supposed to be seen only by board members was exposed to everybody in the organization. I just thought of just using this example. So while organizations try to do a lot around protecting networks, applications, and extending zero trust model there, they actually leave the data aspect, and it's important for organizations to understand how information is exposed or overexposed, to who all is it exposed, is the users, are the users who are accessing it need to access that information or not? Are they having the right permissions to access that information or not? And then look at finding ways to automatically remove unauthorized users and excessive permissions on files and folders or data in general. So that is something that I want to mention when it comes to zero trust. I think Sangamesh mentioned about the CII model around. When you look at CII model around information security, I'll just be very quick in the interest of time. So confidentiality aspect, when we actually interact with customers, we see is predominantly external focused. Organizations have deployed a lot of data protection controls. They try their best to ensure that identified sensitive data does not lead to unauthorized recipients externally or unauthorized destinations. But they don't actually go and extend that internally. And that's where I think the reason why I'm saying this is important is because ransomware, what typically does, whenever it gets a user credential, it goes and encrypts files. So the maximum number of files that particular account can go and access, it tries to encrypt or corrupt those files, right? So it's important to limit overexposure. Integrity standpoint, it's predominantly around encryption for most organizations. A lot of value can be derived for organizations if they start tracking usage of data and see whether information is actually getting tampered or not. Are people abnormally accessing files? Are people abnormally deleting files? Are we seeing a user accessing 100 files in less than a minute? Are we seeing users accessing files and folders that the particular user has never accessed before? So it's important to extend integrity aspect from data usage standpoint. And if organizations do that, then it can be a huge value for them to detect and predict complex insider threats and ransomware threats and things like that. And lastly, from an availability standpoint, most organizations have backup and DR strategies, but it lacks the data context. And what I essentially mean by that is a board member's data as well as a contract employee's data go into a same backup drive, and once it goes to the backup drive, anybody can see that file. If organizations need to have cross-border data transfer regulations, are they actually getting, is that data getting extended to an organization's, or is that context getting extended to an organization's backup strategy? So it's important to embed the data context everywhere, because I strongly believe that data is the only constant other than users for most organizations. And if organizations find ways to have more controls and find ways to get more context around data that they're, important data that they have, how it's being used, and who are accessing it, then I think organizations will be able to have a comprehensive zero trust framework in place. That's it from me, Ambarish.
Yeah, thanks, Mahesh. I think you brought out points related to identity access management, which is key to the zero trust. And then you talked about how to ensure that your data protection strategy itself is aligned to the holistic your cybersecurity strategy. Okay. So Varundeep, I'll bring it to you because might be you might have a security function, IT function reporting to you, right? Generally it happens. Then you will have a tough time. Probably one guy is talking about security and one guy is operations. How to strike a balance to ensure that security and compliance is taken care. We like to know your opinion on this.
Right. So,
Right.
Ambarish,
So, Ambarish,
if you can please
if you can
go
please
on.
go on.
Ambarish, if you can mute.
Ambarish, if you can make.
Yeah. So,
Right. So thank you very much. I would say here that I agree with most of my fellow panelists. What the points that they have brought in. What happens is that when businesses always talk about agility and moving on to the market pretty quickly. In order to do that, the things which are going to take time, they will say, okay, cut across that particular time. And security is one of the areas where people will say, okay, we will do it later. Just go functionally live and make the functionality available, and then security is something which is always put on the back burner. So here what we have done, well, firstly we have divided the teams into BAU as well as digital transformation, so that the focus of both teams remain clear. Second thing is that like we said, we have to prioritize security in terms of and within security we need to prioritize. Like if here we are talking about digital transformation, and here with zero trust our parameter has changed. It has moved from network to identity, right? And where attacks are mostly now happening on identity, that means identity parameter is something which is non negotiable, non compromisable as of now. And whenever we design any user journey or user flow, instead of only we follow the design thinking approach, but whenever we create a user journey, and while mapping the user journey we also map the attacker journey, and we see what are the areas which are non compromisable, which we need to address. Even if we have to cut across the time, we cannot cut across the things which can go wrong. Secondly, like I said earlier, that security is not only infosec or appsec team's responsibility. It has to be a responsibility, shared responsibility, where we have introduced or trained our developers how to write secure codes. And what are the things where every deployment that goes into life, it has to pass through two tests. One is your SAST or DST tools, which we have incorporated into the CI/CD pipeline, and second is the AppSec team giving that clearance. And there also no critical and high issues are compromised. They have to resolve that. And for low or medium, if that the impact is not much, and then the risk acceptance has to happen. Because here we cannot say okay, the developer left it out, I and security team can say okay, I have raised it and my responsibility is over. It has to be jointly owned. And that is where a collaboration culture comes into picture, where we say this is there. And all the other aspects, like I mentioned earlier also, automation is very much important and required. Like Maheshwaran touched upon the data aspect. This is where we also even check within our organization, if you are having a role where you do not have anything that you have to share outside the organization, and if you are sharing an information outside, first the policies will not allow corresponding to your role that you are allowed to share outside. But if somebody by mistake has extended that particular role, so automation will point it out. And secondly, immediately you will get a notification asking for clarification for what reasons you have shared some information outside, because your role doesn't ask for particular information to be shared outside. Other thing which I agree, again Maheshwaran has brought in a very important point, which we are very particular about, is data. What we have seen, the kind of information that we are bringing in and even creating during creation of APIs, we will say okay, let's give as an output whatever is required, which we might require in future, just to save upon the time in order to redevelopment. What happens that we overexpose the information, we pass on any information which we think that might be required. So in order to do that, what we do, if we have to even enable that, that doesn't go beyond that point where it is externally exposable. It is the taken care, well taken care at our API manager layers. And in order to bring in agility, we what we have done, we have smartly used API managers where the security layers are built over there, so that we can reuse those components, rather than expecting our developers to do a PhD in security and writing a secure code and then missing out on something. Because here if somebody is writing, somebody has to validate also. Other thing which with the digital transformations coming in, we are still protecting the systems with the old ways of the security. If you are managing microservices, you have to take care of the security aspects. You cannot do the security checks, or you cannot implement security the way you have been doing in terms of monolith. So from these aspects, it is very important that what we want to do, don't do security for the sake of security or a compliance tick mark. It has to be followed in letter and spirit. And and like we say, budgets cannot be infinite budgets. So that means, as first aspect, we have to see what is critical for our organization, what is non-negotiable, non-compromisable. Put your focus energy onto it, and then involve a managed security services provider who can guide your teams on the newer technologies, rather you reinventing the wheel and learning through shocks or breaches. So this is what I want to put across.
Yeah, thanks, Varundeep. I think you brought out focus on the identity and access management, you talked about uh, ownership and accountability of the cybersecurity team itself, right? It happens, it's a very tedious task. Like somebody finds a vulnerability and thereafter he says, okay, people are not adhering to not closing it, what I can do, right? He has to take ownership of making sure that it's closed. And then we talked about look at the security holistically, which are the people are consuming the data and what the security we have in and around the data. API security, application security, maybe web application, etc. Because they are the general way of people are accessing your data. So Sangamesh, I'll bring you in. So from the compliance perspective, look at what do you think in your view, where while we are one way we are one one end we are talking about zero trust, one another end we are talking about agility, digital transformation, adoption, etc. And how to strike a balance ensuring the security and compliance uh, in the organization.
Yeah, thanks, Ambarish. In fact, like it is actually an interesting question. But while we talk about the adoption of digital first and zero trust, let me take a step back.
Sangamesh, you are talking on mute, I think.
Hope you are able to hear me. Yeah. Okay. So while we talk about digital first and zero trust, right? So I would like to take a step back now and look at like what has been the traditional ways, right? So if you ask me, my perspective is like the adoption is good, but are we ready for that? The answer is no. From many organization perspective, they need to have their basics right. Basically, like practicing the IT hygiene. In fact, like Mahesh was bringing out the aspect of the identity and the threats around that and the protection as well. So many times, like people look at practicing the IT hygiene is so complex, but actually it should be inculcated as a design for the organization right from its reference architecture itself. Let's take an example of some of the breaches where it has created a big impact to the organization, right? So let's take an example of WannaCry itself, which is very well known to everyone here in this forum. There was a vulnerability on SMB service, right? I mean, Microsoft has released the patch during February itself, but we had good amount of time of 3 months, before WannaCry. So WannaCry actually came in the month of May, if I'm not wrong, May 17th, right? So we still had good amount of time for us to patch our systems, but many organization has fallen prey to it. I mean, it was a catastrophic situation for many organization where some of them, they didn't even know like what is happening. They were not even aware about like it is a ransomware and it has encrypted all my files, and attacker is demanding a ransom, right? So I mean, that is one of the case, like the organization is failing in practicing the IT hygiene in terms of doing a vulnerability assessment and enforcing the appropriate patch management process into their cycle. And so as the case with in terms of some of the other breaches where it was leading I mean, to the lateral movement, just because like they have not hardened their systems properly. They are not locking down the SMB services, and also from the network perspective, they have not done the micro segmentation, or even some of the organization, they will even have the crown jewels in the flat network itself, right? So my point of view is like let us even get into the next phase of zero trust and digital first, digital first. Let us look at the basics first, to correct ourselves, to make sure that like we are actually taking care of the IT hygiene properly, diligently and cautiously, and then like look forward for the zero trust and digital first. While it is unavoidable to get into zero trust model
Zero trust model.
based on threats that we see in the industry, based on the requirements from the regulatory standard as well. But obviously, like when you get into zero trust, obviously you need to have your basics right, and we should be prepared for that. So my point of view to the organization, let us really look onto the security strategy in terms of what are all the controls that we have, and are we leveraging the fullest potential of the security controls? Are we looking at enabling the best practices from a policy perspective, and ensuring that like we are protecting our information assets, be it a data or the computer, whatever, right? And then look at like the exposure, and then start adopting the zero trust, so that like you can define the strategy for your zero trust as well, in terms of denying everything and trusting what and allowing the one that you trusted, right? And obviously digital first is something that is unavoidable in this current juncture, because this pandemic has created us an opportunity to go digital and also get connected to this cyber world for every single business, right? We have been able
We
to
have been able
uh,
to
business without any disruption during this pandemic, sitting from remote places, be it at home or even anywhere else, right? So that is actually the opportunity that we see, like every organization should get into that, and they should consider, have the thought process of going digital, and also ensuring that they are balancing that with the security aspect as well. That's my point of view, Ambarish. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Sangamesh, you brought out that strike a balance between, look at balance between what you have, right? How to consolidate that. Look at don't look at if everyone is embarking on digital transformation journey, so you need to catch up, right? You need to look at your basics. If your basics are strong, you can build in any building, right?
Yes.
Whether
Yes.
it's zero trust or you want to leverage digital technology, etc. But basics has to be strong. Yeah, Prachi, I
That's
just coming
yeah.
to you quickly. I think we are very short of time. I think we are already overshot. So, what is your opinion on this? How do you ensure that security, compliance, etc., are taken care in this fast-moving uh, landscape, threat, etc., and where you look at the business wanted to go live as quickly as possible?
Thanks, Ambarish. I think my fellow panelists have covered most of it. But what I will agree with is absolutely, Sangamesh said, practice the IT hygiene and have a base for everything that you're putting in place, right? When you're having a digital transformation journey for an organization, understand your parameters, understand what base you're working on, and build it upon. For me personally, I feel security is like a cement. So when you're building your house, you do not let the cement go. That is very, very crucial. Think from that perspective and then inculcate and inbuild security the same way in your journey. But one more segment that I would probably want to just touch upon is what I feel about the shadow IT concept, which is nothing but different teams working on their own internal, say, software or hardwares, and having their own technology in place. That is very easy to miss during this journey, right? While we are putting in place a base for the IT team, for our, even I think someone in the comments mentioned about the three, sorry, anyways, I'll come back to that. So it is very easy to miss out on something like that. Our IT team will focus on their own, technology that they have in place, their own inventory. But it is very important to understand what other aspects are coming in the organization, what other technology, software, hardware, whatever is being implemented in the organization, and taking a secure objective towards that as well. I think Maheshwaran also meant that zero trust includes network, IAM. This will cover that aspect. So when you're looking at who is working on what technology, how many access they have, what all sites or applications they're logging in, this will definitely be covered. But it is very easy to miss this, and it is very crucial to involve it in any digital transformation journey. In the interest of time, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thanks, Prachi. I think overall, if you look at our discussion, what we had, overall themes coming out is to ensure the security and compliance in one stack, right? To ensure have reasonable assurance about what is your security posture on prem, cloud, hybrid, etc. One theme is coming out to focus on the building blocks, basics. Second thing is look at security holistically, have a strategy around it. Like so you have a long-term, short-term plans, right? If you are embarking on the journey of digital transformation, look at your digital transformation strategy, which align to the overall objective organizational strategy, which includes IT security strategy together, right? Fourth is Mahesh was talking about look at the data, put the data into the center, and then build your security strategy around it. That is how we'll probably approach should be there to achieve the zero trust holistically, right? Because zero trust is not not a single year journey; it's a multi-year journey, right? And then Varundeep was talking about look at the identity and access management. Second piece is the people part, like people awareness, skills, right? That's why I think overall theme is look at the people, process, and technology, and how well they are complementing each other. That is the success as a security function will have. Okay, I think it's a very good discussion I think we had, and I'm sure audiences will get benefited out of our discussion. And I'm not sure whether we have any time for the any questions we can take, but at, thanks a lot. Thanks everyone for the time, and thanks a lot all panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Wonderful, everyone. Bye.